A Christian Testimony. From New Age to Jesus Christ, a Modern Spiritual Odyssey. Part 7 of 9. In Part 7, he embarks on a journey through the Himalayas, facing many obstacles. This journey tests him physically and spiritually, leading to deep introspection. Ultimately, in a moment of profound inner turmoil, he calls out to God for help and has a powerful encounter with Jesus, Yeshua, leading him to choose a new path of obedience and discipleship to Jesus Christ, after recognizing the deception of his previous beliefs. From that time forward I began to notice literally hundreds of leeches that had ascended the surrounding foliage desiring to make contact with some passerby. Natives would agilely pass me by on the path with their ankles bleeding from the parasites. Upon reaching a very large village area called Doshi Bazaar, which was fairly well populated, I became deathly ill with a fever. A gracious person took my offer to pay for refuge as I sought to recover. I remember the beautiful strong beam frame of the house and the adobe walls recently refreshed with a new layer of clay. Quickly I fell asleep racked and even delirious with fever. On occasion as time went by I would rise enough out of my condition to eat a bowl of rolled rice and milk only to again be immersed in fitful dreams and visions. I trembled and moaned with dream after vague dream. At one point I dreamt I was in a large theater filled to overflowing. I sat in the very front row looking up at extremely tall dark red velvet curtains. Next to me sat a young lady friend who was also expectantly waiting for the stage to open. Suddenly I was constrained to leave this setting and pleaded with my friend to go with me. She obstinately refused, at which point I arose and began walking up the long walkway grieving that I had no friend. To compound this, all of the people of the theater began raucously laughing at me because of my departure. As I was leaving, a light shone from above and a voice spoke and said, "I will be your friend." So deeply affected was I by this event that I awoke only to find the fever completely gone. Up and away I went, thanking my gracious host who marveled at my recovery. Well on my way in the trek I also contracted a violent stomach problem. Quite ill I arrived at the Tudanchiling Tibetan Buddhist monastery. It was the heart of a very religious season. The enormous grounds of the place were abuzz with monks participating in various rituals. Before long, under the care of the place, I found myself in their temple actively engaging in their chanting. I drank liquid from the silver-lined skull of a long-dead highly esteemed incarnation of Buddha. With my hands intertwined in a ritualistic fashion I received tokens of grain to eat. How fantastically the place was enshrouded in every form of art depicting the many and varied aspects of this particular branch of Buddhism. Thangka paintings were everywhere and prayer flags draped poles from the tops of every building. Worshippers constantly circled the grounds zealously chanting mantras on their prayer beads. Mandalas, mantras and images of their gods and Buddhas exquisitely painted filled their walls. I had audience with several highly respected lamas. As the ritual season ended I received a small butter Buddha, a red string draped about my neck and a packet of very valuable Sanskrit parchments to deliver to the Thangboki monastery where I was instructed I would meet my teacher. By now my trek was well into the higher reaches of the Himalayas. Most of my travel was spent high above timberline in view of the majestic always white peaks of the border between Nepal and Tibet. The nights were cold and the rumble of avalanches could be heard in the distance. On what seemed to be a barren mountainside stood a small village called Namche Bazaar. It was a village of Sherpas and Tibetans that had been exiled by the communist Chinese. While their Nepalese officials stamped my visa and warned me I was entering the demilitarized zone between Nepal and Red China. At that time I was not far from the monastery named Thangboki. Onward I pressed. The view was majestic, revealing the vast steep slopes of the region. In one glance you could see a panorama of the seasons. Way below, thousands of feet, were the green verdant jungles pierced through the middle by the raging torrents of a river that showed pure white from my vantage point. With but a slight glance up, it was as it were as though a line had been drawn between the jungle and the next strata of plant life that showed brilliantly bright with the colors of autumn. A long band of red, orange and yellow raced across the sides of the immense open slopes. The brown-gray barren ridges and slopes were next in succession up the mountain sides. It was in that level that I walked, following the ancient path that wind their way around and through the mountains. As the days went by I would pass many a Buddhist stupa, piles of rocks placed strategically on the trail by passers-by as they pressed on in their pilgrimages. Above this climbed the great Himalayan mountains. It is hard to express the true height of these peaks. Pure white and very rugged jagged ridges and peaks piercing the sky several thousand feet above my worn path, which was already at least 14,000 feet in altitude. In a glance up or down were thousands of feet of terrain spanning many ecosystems. The days that I walked were in the fall of the year, and the last vestiges of the monsoon season often left fantastic displays of color in the sky also. Misty clouds would erupt from the jungle regions below and billow up the steep canyons to emerge in the higher regions, forming clouds of rainbow colors during sunset. It was an area such as this that I stopped to meditate and practice my spiritual disciplines. Once again I alienated myself from all but that inner spiritual reality and spheres of mystical initiation through the trance-like states. After some time I once again broke my meditation, and as usual I was gripped by the sensation that so many on the path called unstressing. Much of the arcane literature describes what I'm talking about as the death to self, or the unraveling of self-identity, which was so important a part of mystical life. It is painful. While entranced I would be virtually oblivious of such things, but when I would once again come to myself I would be gripped by a gnawing awareness of great want in my life and heart. In one moment there was the surge of power and bliss of the altered states of mystical initiation. In the next there was the gripping stark reality of the effects that this metamorphosis was effecting in my soul. What was the truth of all of this? By what standard should I judge my experience? After exerting all the substance of consciousness and soul, why does the resultant effects read out like the harsh dualism of life and death? How can nirvana and samsara be one and the same? In anguish of heart I began to cry out to God, to Buddha, to Jesus, to whoever would hear me. With much weeping and desperate brokenness of heart I wailed for a length of time. Tears and soul cry poured out of me. I must have the truth. Sobbing and supplication with trembling went from depth to depth. Truly it was a cry from the utmost depths of my inner man. It welled up from within like a spring, with my groaning going forth expressing what words could not. I travailed and poured out my soul like water. With great lamentation, as though I mourned for death of a loved one, swept over me. I knew in some unknown manner that in spite of all the signs that I was succeeding, I was in fact failing utterly. At the height of achievement the pangs of emptiness that had haunted me all my life rose up from some hidden prison of my heart. I knew I was in great need. My efforts to prevail over ignorance, darkness and pain were merely a disguise that hid the reality of my own want. I laid in a pool of tears for a short time, seeking to regain my composure. The intensity of emotion began to give way to spiritual sensitivity. Like ice in a spring thaw, my ignorance began to melt and give way to light. Knowledge to turn from darkness to light was bestowed on me. As I turned toward spiritual light, the heavy shroud of darkness that had engulfed my soul began giving way. A spiritual door had opened before me. As I turned and entered, the light of life flooded my inner being. A hideous weight and great shadow came off me. Peace and comfort washed over me. Looking up, in the great distance high above me stood a figure. As the sun appears through the clouds on an overcast day, so this brilliant form appeared to me. I had no doubt that this was Jesus, Yeshua, the Messiah. Inexpressible relief came over me. Can you imagine an individual walking through a desert many days in the heat of the sun and many nights without water? Then to have someone appear, when all hope was gone, to give you a full drink of fresh sweet water to quench your thirst? So was my heart refreshed when I turned to Yeshua. I knew that Jesus, Yeshua Messiah, wanted me to follow him. I didn't know what that meant practically, but like a man who finds great treasure and guards it, I was unwilling to ever go away for all eternity from him. Other things came to my awareness. I knew that the experience of the blue light that I was following was a deception, a false light that was actually darkness. Consider being a creature of the night. Imagine if you were taken into a room where there was an ultraviolet black light and there were posters on the walls with ornate and beautiful designs and symbols glowing because of the black light. These would appear as bright lights in contrast to the darkness. But then consider someone else bringing you to a door and opening it so you could see the sun for the first time. The contrast between these two lights was that profound to me. Every idea or experience of peace that I had heretofore known was now revealed as the stillness of death rather than the true peace of life. I said, Master, Teacher, I will do all that you wish. I surrender my life to you. If it's your will for me to remain here in a cave for the rest of my days, I will do it. Only let me be your disciple. From the very onset I knew that my relationship to him was directly related to obedience to him. To obey and surrender was also to abide in his presence. This is the end of part 7 of 9. Please like, share, or subscribe to our channel. Thank you and may God bless you. Thank you for listening to this testimony, we hope it has been helpful. Now, let's briefly introduce a new book, The Surface Theory by R.G. Gibson, that presents 2 new innovative creation theories. Born from personal revelation and years of research, these 2 theories emerged from previously overlooked key words, offering profound new insights into Genesis. This book also unveils new scientific discoveries related to this topic. Prepare for a paradigm shift that makes Genesis logical, dissolving the previous barriers between faith and science. Find the key to these mysteries and many more within the pages of The Surface Theory by R.G. Gibson, available on Amazon.